What's going on, guys? It's Fantasy Stock Exchange here, bringing another episode of our ranking show we actually got going on the channel. So last week I was actually doing it on my own, but today I'm actually joined by Bush. So yeah, going on with this series, we're basically just talking about our own personal rankings, who we're higher on, lower on, must starts, type busts, in comparison to where ECR currently has them ranked. So definitely going to be a fun episode. We're going to get down, roll up the elbows or roll up the sleeves, you know what I mean, and get to work. But before we do that, Corey, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Yeah, we know we're kind of testing this out. Let us know in the comments of what you think of this. Do you want both of us on the show? Do you want just Danny? Like, whatever. The only option is that I can't do this show alone because I have a lot of stuff to do. But
Yeah.
let us know how you guys like this. If you like us both kind of going back and forth on our rankings. And as always, if you want to support the show, you can do so for free by hitting the button that looks like this. Again, comment any of your thoughts down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Hit the bell icon so you're notified anytime we go live or anytime we post videos. And then if you want to support the show financially, patreon.com/fantasy stock exchange. Yeah, let's hit the intro. All right, now before we get into the rankings, you guys know about it thus far. Jock Market, the new way to play daily fantasy sports. Jock MKT is the place to go. It's where the daily fantasy sports market becomes a stock exchange. And basically how it works is each NFL Sunday, there's going to be an IPO just like the regular stock market where you can bid on your favorite players or any player that you just assume is going to go off. And you basically make money or make chips, depending on if you're in a free contest, based on how well that player does. And you can cash out, let's say at halftime, Lamar Jackson went off for 3 touchdowns in the first half. Maybe you made a $15 profit on the shares that you had. Maybe you sell him off because you don't think he's going to have as good of a second half, so on and so forth. You can buy and sell shares of players with other users in real time. As I mentioned, if someone has a down first half, maybe you buy low on them and vice versa. You make money every hour, every minute, every second of every game with Jock Market.
Yeah, for sure. Just touching upon it. I mean, the aspect of Jock Market that is really unique in its way compared to like just FanDuel, DraftKings, is that the live trading aspect really adds a new mentality, new type feel to the game. Again, as you mentioned, if Lamar Jackson's struggling at half or is having a really good game at half, you think he's going to tone it down for the second half, say they're up big and you think they're going to run the ball, you can sell that share at half. Or if you have a quarterback and he's down big in the first half, you think that the pass attempts, the volume is going to increase in the second half, you can buy that player at half, flip him for value after the game, and boom, you're good. But talking about it, there's daily contests that are live for NFL, NBA, and PGA as well. So, I mean, if you're looking at it in terms of Jock Market, you can take control of your fantasy sports experience. Right now is the easiest time to play in free contests where you stack chips and climb the leaderboards. I mean, for us in Canada, because we can't actually put money in. But if you're actually in the States, there are paid contests where you can trade actual live real cash. So, I mean, download now on the App Store. Android is actually coming very soon, but it is available on iOS thus far. So, Jock Market, can't say enough good things about this app. Make sure you go check it out.
Awesome. All right, so let's get into the quarterback position. Basically, Danny, you're going to have this on the screen right now, right?
Yep.
All right, so these are you going to put both of our rankings on the screen? You can cut this out.
Yeah, I can put both rankings on the screen.
Okay, so on the screen right now, you're going to see both of our rankings side by side on the screen. And as you can see, there's certain guys that we're higher on and lower on. On the right column, it says versus ECR, which means we're plus that many points on where the ECR has that player, or minus however many that ECR has that player as well. So some of the guys that we're higher on, for example, I have Justin Herbert +5 in comparison to consensus. And I mean, same goes for Joe Burrow at +6. I just think these guys are both your prototypical fantasy quarterbacks. They're not necessarily the greatest quarterbacks in the league, even though Herbert is actually playing pretty well. Same goes for Joe Burrow, but they're going to run a lot. They're going to throw a lot. They scramble, they pick up yards, and they have the downfield like mentality of throwing it deep. So those are the type of guys that you want in your fantasy lineup. And I think both of them are in pretty solid matchups to throw the ball a lot this week, even if maybe the defenses that they're going up against are not the like friendliest.
Yeah, no, I fully agree on those guys. I mean, I actually had Herbert listed as well. Burrow, I have a little bit higher as well. But talking about Herbert, I mean, I have 7 spots ahead of ECR right now. Currently have him at 11. His current ranking is actually at 18, as you guys can see on the screen. I mean, he's just looked really good as a player since he took over for Tyrod Taylor. I mean, this is a guy who we both thought would be raw coming into the NFL. But man, over these last 3 games, 310 passing yards per game, 5 touchdowns to 3 interceptions, and over 100 quarterback rating thus far. Not to mention, I mean, people are going to look at the Saints and say, oh, on paper, they're a very tough pass defense, so it's really hard to get points on them. They're actually allowing 22.84 points per game to the position, which is 7th worst in the league thus far. So, I mean, Herbert, fire him up as a quarterback 1 this week, as I kind of mentioned in the waiver show as well. Talking about other options that I would be higher on, the one in particular that really stands out is going to be Ben Roethlisberger. So going against a Eagles defense who's actually been shredded when they face NFL starting caliber quarterbacks. I mean, I'm looking at you, Nick Mullins and Dwayne Haskins, because you ain't it. In those 2 games, though, where they actually played some good passers, talking about Joe Burrow and Jared Goff, they actually allowed 579 total passing yards to those 2 quarterbacks and 5 touchdowns across those 2 games. So I would definitely start Ben Roethlisberger with a confidence. I actually have him 3 spots ahead of where ECR currently has him ranked.
Yeah, I'm actually lower on Ben Roethlisberger. It's not necessarily because I don't like the matchup. I just think because Deontay Johnson is probably going to be kind of taken out of this game by Darius Slay, it's going to rely more on Juju Smith-Schuster. And this is really nitpicky. It's just because there's a lot of good options at the quarterback position, as there is every week, because, I mean, the NFL's a passing league. There's 20-plus quarterbacks that you can start in fantasy every week, which is why we suggest that you don't draft quarterbacks early for this exact reason. Anyway, another guy that I'm a bit higher on than consensus, obviously, this is awaiting like word that this game actually happens, is Ryan Tannehill at +6. A.J. Brown is expected to come back in this game. And I know he'll likely be seeing a lot of Tre'Davious White if that is the case. I think Tannehill is just playing great. He's playing efficient ball the way Ryan Tannehill always plays. A lot of play action, a lot of rollout plays, and he can run as well. So Tannehill at 15, I think that's exactly where Tannehill belongs pretty much every week is quarterback 15. That's about the range that he should be sitting in. And, I mean, the experts have him at 21. I don't know if that's hesitancy between the game not happening or not, but I think if this game happens, he's going to be a top 15 quarterback. And the Bills have not been nearly as good against the pass as they have been going back as like to last year.
Yeah, I will be completely honest. I have him ranked currently at the 21. And the reason being is must have just been a name I glanced over when I was doing the rankings because of the uncertainty of the game happening. But realistically, if I were to redo these rankings hypothetically, looking at it, he would probably be in that Jared Goff, Joe Burrow type area at that 14 to 16 type area for me. So it says 21 on the screen. You guys can see it right now. But to be honest, that's one I just glanced over when I was doing the quarterback rankings. So my fault. Anyways, talking about guys I'm lower on. Let's get out of that. Drew Brees is a big one for me. Yeah. I have him 5 spots lower than consensus. I believe you have him actually the same.
I do. And for me, it's kind of going to depend on what Michael Thomas does. If Michael Thomas, and we might not know this, if you have Drew Brees, you probably likely have other options that you can stream. And going into Monday Night Football, unless you have Justin Herbert on your team, I would opt to play other players against instead of Drew Brees. I would rather play Kirk Cousins. I'd rather play Justin Herbert, as I mentioned. I'd rather play Teddy Bridgewater. I'd rather play Gardner Minshew and Joe Burrow. Like if you don't have to wait on Michael Thomas's health to know whether or not you should start Drew Brees, I suggest you just sit Drew Brees because there's plenty of other options out there. Agreed.
I was actually going to cite physical decline of him as well. I mean, obviously the Michael Thomas factor, we don't know if he's going to play. Just talking about Brees as a player. He hasn't been the same quarterback this year. Yes, last year he was quarterback 3 on points per game. We know this. But so far this year, he's the quarterback 20 thus far in points per game with a clear deterioration in his overall arm strength. I mean, he had the favorable matchup last week as well, 15.54 fantasy points. And in general, he's just a low ceiling type option, in my opinion, given that lack of arm strength, given the lack of weapons if Michael Thomas were to not play in this game. So to have him where ECR currently has him, and let me just check where that currently is. That's quarterback 11. I do not trust him whatsoever as a quarterback 1 thus far. I mean, where I have him currently, mid to high quarterback 2, I think is where he belongs. And I can see you agree as well, having him at the exact same ranking.
Yeah, and another guy that I'm lower on, I have Jared Goff 5 spots lower than consensus. And again, I don't hate Jared Goff. With quarterbacks, it's really ticky-tacky because there's so many good options. I have Jared Goff at 19 because he's basically been exactly what Baker Mayfield has been thus far this season. He's been low volume. When he has a good game, it's because he was efficient. Like, the Washington football team is not a good team. They have Kyle Allen starting at quarterback. Jared Goff and the Rams are probably going to win this game pretty easily. And not only that, but the Rams are one of the highest percentages of neutral game run to pass split right now. So I'd imagine if they get up in this game, it's going to be a heavy dose of Darrell Henderson and Malcolm Brown. And I believe Cam Akers is actually supposed to play in this game. So I think the run game is how they close this one out. Maybe Goff gets like 2 or 3 touchdowns in the first quarter, in the first 2 quarters, which is probably what you're going to have happen if he's going to be really good for fantasy this week. I just don't think he's going to be in a position this week to be throwing the ball all over the yard.
Yeah, no, that's definitely fair. Talking about guy I am lower on before we go into the next position being the running back position. I'm actually going to be talking about Daniel Jones. I have him 3 spots lower than consensus. And yes, this is not just because he plays my team. I'm not going to be that biased by doing that. The reason why he's 3 spots lower is because ECR is ridiculous and has him as a
they got to chill. I think they're getting a little overboard with the Cowboys defense sucks. Like, yes, the Cowboys defense sucks. You know this as well because you're a Cowboys fan, but I think we're all just copy and pasting. Oh, any quarterback can go off against this defense. And the Giants offense has been terrible. They've scored less points this whole season
than the Browns
put up last week on the Cowboys.
Yeah. No, they scored 47 points on the season. The Browns put up 49 last week against the Cowboys. Yes, it is a very favorable matchup. I understand that. But at the same time, this is more so like, like the saying, like an immovable object against a unstoppable force.
A very movable object against a very stoppable force.
Yeah, that's basically what this matchup is. So if you're talking about Daniel Jones, just briefing over before we go into position, quarterback 30 on points per game thus far. And since week 1, he's had 1 game where he had 10.1 points. Has not had a game where he had more than that. So, I mean, realistically, ranking him ahead of, or ECR currently has him ranked ahead of Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, it makes no sense to me.
No, yeah. And I agree. He's a streamable option if you need a streamer. Like, yeah, he's a good option, but would it shock me if he busts? No, because the Giants offense sucks.
Yeah, I mean, he's so volatile in terms of his range of outcomes this week. To ultimately have him at 15 just completely mitigates the risk or extrapolates the risk. Sorry.
Yeah.
My bad. Anyways, let's get into the running backs. Let's get off Daniel Jones and that anemic passing offense for the Giants. Let's go.
Yeah, let's talk about one anemic passing offense to another, and that's the Philadelphia Eagles. I have Miles Sanders at 5 spots higher than ECR, and it's not necessarily because I think Miles Sanders is some smash play this week. He plays the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's not a good matchup on the ground, but Miles Sanders is a workhorse running back. Like, he gets volume out the wazoo. Like, he is going to see a lot of targets. Saquon saw 9 targets against this defense in week 1, and Miles Sanders has a similar usage level in terms of his routes that he runs and the amount of targets he gets. He gets workhorse volume in the receiving game, and this team is not going to get anything going through the air against this defense with the 2 pass rushers that they have. So I'd imagine it's going to be a lot of get the ball out quick stuff for Carson Wentz in the pocket. And I wouldn't be shocked if Miles Sanders catches 7 or 8 balls.
This to me kind of screams a Miles Sanders Ertz game because they're not going to have enough time to deliver it down the field to guys like Deshaun Jackson and Greg Ward if they have any time whatsoever.
I don't think Deshaun Jackson. I think Deshaun Jackson's out too.
He's out too. Okay,
yeah.
Well,
that's Greg why I'm like Sanders is just going to get a lot of targets. That's basically how I look at it. If you're any kind of PPR league, if you're in a standard league, I probably wouldn't have him this high. But if it's full PPR, half PPR, he's going to rack up receptions, and he probably he might get into the end zone or something too. Like, I think he's just going to get enough volume that it's gonna sustain him. And if he has a bad game in this one, he's going to be one of my biggest trade target candidates because I know the offensive line is completely decimated and you never want that for your running back. But I mean, that only downgrades him, in my opinion, from like a top 8 running back to like a top 12 running back, the offensive line injuries, because his volume is just so insane. And he's just so good as a runner and a receiver that it kind of makes up for it. Yeah,
no, that's definitely fair. Talking about my guy though, we're going to get into Dalvin Cook, who I mean, it's not a huge discrepancy. Again, he's ECR 3. This is kind of just my claim as to why he's my RB1 on the week. So if you're looking at it thus far, Dalvin Cook on the season has been absolutely fantastic. 22.5 half PPR points per game on a ridiculous 6 rushing touchdowns with 4 games. The reason why I have him this high is because the touchdown potential in an ultimate shootout that we expect between the Vikings and Seahawks on Sunday Night Football. So, I mean, to be completely honest here, Dalvin Cook is a near lock to score in this game. The Seahawks are not good against the pass whatsoever. Yes, that people may say, oh, well, they're decently efficient against the run. But hypothetically, if the Vikings are absolutely carving them with the pass game and they're getting trips to the red zone, what do they do in the red zone? They give the ball to Dalvin Cook, as evidenced by those 6 rushing touchdowns in 4 games.
That's a really good point, actually. A lot of people don't think about stuff like that. They're like, oh, like they're bad against the pass, so all the pass catchers go off. But you got to keep in mind what a team's identity is. Like we saw last week with with the Browns and the Cowboys.
Yeah.
Yes, the Cowboys are terrible against the pass, but the Browns are a running team, and they can probably run on anyone. And I think we're going to see this week them still run on the Colts, even though the Colts are a great run defense. But they had more passing success against the Cowboys than they typically would against another team. But they still, at the bottom line is this team is a running team, as are the Vikings, and they're going to run the ball with Dalvin Cook when they have the opportunities to, when it matters most in the red zone.
Absolutely. I will actually talk about Kareem Hunt in a bit after you go through your guy. But who's your guy in terms of the running backs?
One of my other guys is Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon I have him 6 spots higher than consensus at RB 14. He's only why is he running back 20 in ECR? Can anyone name 20 healthy running backs? I can't. He's getting completely workhorse volume right now. And I know Phillip Lindsay is slated to come back in this game, but I believe Fangio already mentioned he's going to be limited in some capacity. So at least for this week, you have one more week of Melvin Gordon being the workhorse back that he's been without Lindsay in the lineup. And maybe even going forward, you could sell him high, but even going forward, I still think he's going to be a top 16 running back type. And it's New England that he's going up against, but he's looked quite good. Melvin Gordon's looked pretty good. And Jonathan Taylor, what's the difference between Jonathan Taylor and Melvin Gordon? Jonathan Taylor is getting ranked in the top 8, and Melvin Gordon is getting similar volume, looking better on that volume. And I just don't understand why Melvin Gordon is being kind of slandered so much. He had a great game last week.
Yeah, I mean, I have him a little bit lower. That's also due to the fact that I did take into consideration when ranking him that Lindsay may be back and chipping into that workload, combined with that kind of matchup against the Patriots. But I fully understand from full workload volume, especially if Lindsay's going to be limited, as you said. I mean, based on volume, we talk about guys like, for example, I don't know, Ronald Jones this week, David Montgomery, guys like that who are just going to be ranked that high simply due to volume. Melvin Gordon thus far has looked efficient mostly and is going to be slated to get that volume. So if Lindsay plays, yes, I have him at 20 right now, but if Lindsay doesn't play or is limited in any capacity, he's definitely going to be raising up my ranks. So that's definitely a good point that you brought up there.
One more guy I just quickly want to mention as a guy I'm higher on, and this is more so for rankings rather than a start-sit thing. I have Frank Gore 9 spots higher than consensus. That's just kind of how it came out. The way I'm looking at it is I probably wouldn't start him if you can help it. I hope your team isn't that desperate at running back that you have to start Frank Gore, but he's going up against a top 6 matchup in terms of points given up to the running back position, and he gets a lot of volume. So is Frank Gore a top 36 option in terms of rankings and probably where he's going to finish this week? Yeah, probably.
That's fair. Talking about my second guy, you kind of alluded to it with the Browns game plan last week. That is Kareem Hunt. I'm staking my claim right now. Kareem Hunt with Nick Chubb out is going to be a top 3 running back any given week. If you're looking at Kareem Hunt, both the way he's played, the way the offense has played in terms of the running game thus far this year, Kareem Hunt has been, first of all, ridiculous. I mean, the Browns have the number 1 rated rushing attack and the number 1 rated run blocking offensive line in the entire league right now, aka the Kevin Stefanski effect. I mean, that's what happens when you hire a guru of a running coach and actually add to your offensive line. I mean, that Cleveland Browns rushing attack has been fantastic. Yes, Nick Chubb was part of that, but Kareem Hunt in his own right is the RB7 in half PPR on points per game on only 14.5 touches per game. With Nick Chubb out, that's going to go to 18 to 20 touches per game at minimum, to be quite honest, because we don't think much of Dearness Johnson. I mean, 4.9 40-yard dash run. He looked good against the Cowboys. But heck,
he'll probably get 10 carries.
Yeah, I mean, he's a fine player, but realistically, this is Kareem Hunt's backfield. Yes, I do expect it to be allocated a little bit because the Browns just run the ball a ton. The Browns could realistically run the ball 35 to 40 times in this game, and I wouldn't be shocked because it's going to be a slugfest with them and the Colts. And if that's the case, I mean, Kareem Hunt's going to get 20, 25 touches. If he's doing that, he's a near lock for top 3 in any given week for me with Nick Chubb out. So I love Kareem Hunt, and I mean, this is again, staking my claim now, but he's currently ECR 6, and I think that's even low. I have him at 3.
Yeah, I have him at 4, so I'm a little higher on him than ECR as well. I definitely don't hate that call. Speaking of the guys that we're low on, and I mean, this is going to sound like a shock to absolutely no one, but I'm lower on David Johnson, -3 from ECR, and I'm lower on Todd Gurley. Why? Because both of these guys completely suck. They're completely washed. They're completely touchdown dependent. If they don't get a touchdown, they're going to disappoint you. And on David Johnson's perspective, David Johnson's getting 55% of the snaps last week with Duke Johnson coming back into the lineup and no more Bill O'Brien to run the ball up the middle 20 times a game. I think David Johnson's in for an absolute nosedive in terms of his fantasy value. And I think Todd Gurley is kind of going down a similar road. I know he had a 2-touchdown game against the Packers, but again, this dude is completely touchdown dependent.
Yeah, again, I'd probably, for the record, I did the David Johnson ranking prior to the Bill O'Brien signings or firing. So, I mean, if I realistically were to re-rank him, he'd probably be around the 17, 18 mark. But those points, I agree. I mean, Todd Gurley this week, I'm kind of a little bit higher on than you are on him, simply because the matchup and simply because the touchdown opportunity in this game. But not saying I like him as a player whatsoever, because he's going to be inefficient as fuck. I just think he's going to nosedive into the end zone this week, which is why I kind of have him there. I mean, if you're talking about efficient options, realistically, I mean, Melvin Gordon, Kenyon Drake are going to be more efficient this week. So, yeah, talking about that. There's actually, before I get into the guy I'm lower on, there's one more guy I'm higher on than consensus. That's actually Justin Jackson, running back from the LA Chargers. Currently have him as my RB 26, I believe, on the week, or 27. Let's check. Currently have him as our RB 26 on the weekend. To me, he's kind of poised to occupy that Austin Eckler type role in the offense. No, he's not going to be Austin Eckler. He's not going to get 20 touches a game. He's not going to be a top 3 receiving back in the league. But can he do like 70% of what Austin Eckler can do? Maybe. And if he does that, I mean, he's definitely going to be a flex-worthy play, in my opinion, especially against a Saints defense who are stifling against between the tackles type runners like Josh Kelly. Josh Kelly's not going to go anywhere in this game, for the record. Josh Kelly's going to be limited. And if that's the case, in a efficient volume receiving role, I do think that Justin Jackson will ultimately return value, especially in PPR league. So I definitely like him, and I have him pretty significantly ahead of consensus right now. And
we were actually off on him. Like, me and you had like a disconnect, and I'm actually higher on him than consensus too.
There you go.
I have him at RB 34, and you have him what? I guess you
26.
have him at what? 26. Okay, so you're way higher on him than consensus, and I was like, oh, I'm a bit lower on him, and then I realized like I'm still higher than ECR.
Yeah, and the one guy I'm actually like extremely low on compared to consensus, Mark Ingram. I mean, I'm 9 spots lower than him on consensus. I don't even think I'm that low on him. I'm at RB 34. Why does ECR have him at RB 25? What has he done thus far in this season to be worth a RB 25 ranking? So, I mean, to me, he's just a low ceiling, low floor play given the rotation of backs they have in Baltimore right now. I mean, him, Edwards, Dobbins, and then with Lamar Jackson getting freaking like 10 to 14 carries a game. Mark Ingram is just not worth even remotely touching your lineup, in my opinion, unless he's an absolute desperate play. And RB 25, where ECR has him, doesn't mean he's a desperation play. So I am totally off him at that point. RB 34 compared to the RB 25 he's ranked on ECR.
Yeah, see, the thing for me is that so RB 25 for me currently is Myles Gaskin and then Le'Veon Bell at 26. To me, is a massive drop off after that.
Same.
And that's why I have Mark Ingram at 27. I'm 2 spots lower than consensus. But like Malcolm Brown, Darrell Henderson, Latavius Murray, Damian Harris, Keyshawn Vaughn, Chase Edmonds, Justin Jackson, Frank Gore, those are my next ranked like running backs. And as low as I feel on Mark Ingram, like I don't want to start Mark Ingram. I don't feel confident about any of those guys either. And Mark Ingram is still the starting running back, kind of like in terms of touches, but like I don't know. Yeah, like the Ravens backfield is just a complete mess. Like don't start any of these guys if you can help it. But I mean, if you have to pick one, I'm gonna pick Mark Ingram going forward as the guy I'm willing to start.
I definitely agree. I mean, he's kind of in that similar tier of Devontae Freeman, but in general, if you can avoid any of these guys, just start receivers in your flex because don't touch these guys.
Yeah, I would highly advise starting receivers in your flex going forward because I'm sure there's plenty of receivers out there that you can start in your flex. Like I'd much rather start a guy like T. Higgins or Laviska Shenault over Mark Ingram because I kind of know their roles compared to Mark Ingram's. I just have no idea what is going on at the running back position. So here's the hoping that you guys have 2 to 3 running backs that are actually reliable and you don't have to worry about starting like 4 running backs in your lineup because, I mean, there's a very low chance that you have 4 startable running backs on your roster with the way that injuries have gone on in the season so far. So on to the wide receiver position on the screen right now. You'll see both of our rankings. Robert Woods is the first guy I want to talk about. I have him 5 spots higher than consensus. The last 3 weeks, here's who Robert Woods has gone up against in shadow coverage. Darius Slay, Tre'Davious White, and James Bradbury. And Robert Woods hasn't been bad against those guys. Like he was solid. Like he got 10 to like 18 points in all those games. It's not like he was terrible and he ruined your lineup or anything like that. I actually think he's a pretty good buy low candidate right now. If people are panicking on him and they think he's just some like middling wide receiver 3 or something like that, because I still think he's a top 15 option for the rest of the season.
Agreed.
I expect a big high, like a high target game from him in this one. Not necessarily because I think the Rams are going to throw a lot. It's because he finally has a good matchup. And when he's been in good matchups, like he was against the Cowboys in week 1, he had a high target game and he had a lot of fantasy points. So I expect a pretty good outing from Robert Woods in this one. And that's why I have him. I believe he's in my top 10. Yeah, he's at number 9.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fully on board with that. I have him and Woods, or him and Cup actually back to back. They're 12-13 right now in my rankings. And if Lattimore is scheduled to play, I mean, they're definitely, in my opinion, going to jump ahead of like Keenan Allen, for example. So I definitely agree with that ranking there. Talking about a guy I'm very high on compared to, well, not even compared to consensus, but kind of compared to you. This is definitely one that we actually have a bet on this week: Cooper versus Chark. But Amari Cooper is 4 spots higher than consensus for me. I know he's actually, you're going to talk about him as being low for you. He's my wide receiver 2 this week. Bold take, I get it. But man, Amari Cooper, the main kind of detractor for him this week is like, well, he's going to have shadow coverage against James Bradbury. Well, the last corner to actually shadow him week 1, 100% of snaps against him was Jalen Ramsey. Well, how did that work out for a young Jalen Ramsey? To the tune of 14 targets. Dak Prescott had no fear against Jalen Ramsey. He was absolutely peppering Amari Cooper in that matchup. 10 receptions for 81 yards, an absolute PPR beast. I mean, if you're talking about PPR beast for the record, 12.75 targets per game, on pace over a 16-game season for 204 targets in the most pass-heavy offense in the NFL at 69% pass split and 202 attempts in these last 4 games. So, I mean, to me, Amari Cooper's the wide receiver 1 in PPR formats. Right now, our wide receiver 3 in half PPR. To me, he's just an auto top 5 receiver any given week. And in a matchup, in my opinion, where James Bradbury himself is actually going to have his hands full, he's just a lock start, in my opinion. Wide receiver 1, no doubt about it. Until he actually shows the inconsistencies that he's shown in the past, I'm just going to rank him where he's been playing.
Okay, so you just stepped on my point there. You said until he's shown the inconsistencies that he's shown in the past. Well, for him, performing against a shadow matchup against Jalen Ramsey is an inconsistency because the only thing that's consistent about Amari Cooper in his whole career has been that he's been bad in shadow matchups. So I'm going to stick to that, and that's why I do have him lower than consensus. I have him at wide receiver 16, which is actually 10 spots lower. Shadow coverage against James Bradbury has yielded a 52% completion percentage and 82.7 quarterback rating, despite having a rough week 1 against Juju for James Bradbury. So I don't think this is an Amari Cooper game. I think CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup and Dalton Schultz and Ezekiel Elliott are the ones that do all the work in this game. And I think Amari Cooper, they probably just avoid throwing at him. And the reason is because like there's no other, like Darnay Holmes is terrible. Their slot corner. That's like right. CeeDee Lamb is going to eat in this game. I mean, if we're talking about Isaac Yiadom, like the other opposite corners are not nearly as good as James Bradbury.
If we're going to talk about one thing too, you mentioned Darnay Holmes. For the record, I know it's not a huge percentage of his snaps, but he still runs roughly 23% of his total snaps from the slot in terms of Amari Cooper. So, I mean, I do think if James Bradbury were to have, say, some success with him on the outside, they would find ways to get him in the slot. They would find ways to move him around because, I mean, when you have a trio of receivers in him, Lamb, and Gallup, I mean, you find ways to get them open, plain and simple. And I know I say that a lot, but Amari Cooper, although I love CeeDee Lamb, although I love Michael Gallup, is still the alpha of that receiver room. So just a little disconnect there.
I'm just checking something real quick. I want to see if he traveled to the slot with Juju in week 1.
All right, go for it.
Okay, so actually, no, he did not. So you might have a point. If Amari Cooper, if they're able to move him around and get him off of James Bradbury, yes, you might have a point. But Amari Cooper in his career has been a guy that's been inconsistent. I know he hasn't been that thus far this year, but that's who he's always been. It's a guy like Mike Evans and Amari Cooper. I compare them all the time because they're exactly the same player. They go off in great matchups and they do shit in bad matchups. It's just kind of how they are. Sometimes they throw up stinkers and have good games in one or the other, but I'm just going to stick to what I know about Amari Cooper, and that's usually he doesn't do well in good matchups or in bad matchups.
Before we move on, I'll say one more thing on Amari Cooper. This also could be the fact that he's actually recovered from that plantar fasciitis that was affecting him last year. Because to me, when I'm actually watching the games, he just looked like a much smoother player in and out of his breaks. Yes, he's always been one of the top route runners in the NFL, but he's looked smooth. He's looked athletic. He's looked generally quick thus far this season, more so than even last year. I mean, we saw kind of down the stretch, he did fade out again. I mentioned he was a wide receiver 3 in the first 8 games and wide receiver 38 in the last 8. So, I mean, I think that was ultimately due to inconsistency, as you mentioned, as well as injury kind of affecting him.
But that's always been a concern with Amari Cooper. And Amari Cooper could go out in this game and run a route weird and then be out for the game or miss 2 quarters and come back and be inconsistent. Like, That's just
And
the risk you're going to have to take with Amari Cooper if you're going to have him as your like he's probably people's wide receiver 1 or 2 on their team.
yeah.
So the risk that you're taking with Amari Cooper is that he is kind of prone to soft tissue stuff. He just seems to get it more often than some receivers. So I mean, that's just kind of what I'm not predicting that Amari Cooper goes out of this game with an injury.
He's more prone to it, yeah, for sure.
He's more prone to it. Plus, he has a bad matchup. I'm not staying away. I'm still going to start him. He's wide receiver 16 for me, but I'm not going to play him in DFS. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's fair. But we'll see what happens with that little bet this week. But
let me get into a guy because you just talked about Cooper. So Tyler Boyd I have him. Where do I have him? I have him 8 spots higher than consensus. I have him at wide receiver 17. So wide receiver 25 in consensus for the guy who's top 10 in the NFL in targets. He's going up against a corner that allowed 14 completions on 16 targets last week. That was Marlon Humphrey. Allowed 14 completions on 16 targets last week in a game where Burrow should be throwing 40 to 50 passes in this game. I'd imagine that Tyler Boyd has 10 to 15 targets in this game. I think he's going to be heavily involved. If you're in a PPR league and he has 9 catches for 60 yards, that's a great game for PPR. Yeah. Like maybe he could get the end zone or as a big play or whatever. He doesn't need it because he's going to get peppered in this game.
He could have like an A-Rob type game the way A-Rob played this week against the Bucs. I mean, 10 catches, 90 yards, 16 targets is what A-Rob got this week. I can definitely see Boyd
floor is so high.
Sure.
Week in and week out, and especially in this game where you expect Burrow is going to be throwing a lot.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree on that, Boyd. And next guy I mentioned, I mean, this is – if you're watching this, you're just going to think, wow, Danny, of course, Cowboy Homer, of course. But CeeDee Lamb, 7 spots higher than ECR right now. Yes, the first 2 guys I mentioned are Cowboys receivers. You know why? Because, as I mentioned, the Cowboys are the highest volume passing team in the entire NFL. 202 passing attempts in 4 games is just insanity. Like, it's mind-boggling. They're throwing the ball at a 69% clip right now, as I mentioned. And, as you mentioned, Darnay Holmes has sucked in the slot. Where's CeeDee Lamb lined up on 92% of his snaps thus far this year? In the slot. So, I mean, ultimately, CeeDee Lamb to me is a high-end wide receiver 2, to be quite honest, until he proves otherwise. Again, 29 targets in the first 4 games of his career. That's only going to keep going up, only going to keep staying at minimum where it's been, over 7 targets per game. I love CeeDee Lamb, especially in half PPR, full PPR. I do think he's going to ultimately get peppered as, I'm afraid to say it because I love Gallup, but, man, he's been the wide receiver 2 on the Cowboys thus far. In terms of role.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. No arguments here. Another guy I'm higher on. We have a lot of receivers to talk about because I would say of the positions in fantasy, receiver is the hardest to make start-sit decisions about, mainly because it's the opposite of the running back position. There's so many good options that you can start. It's like, man, how do I choose between this guy and this guy? They basically all seem the same when you're talking about wide receiver like 18 to like 35, to be completely honest. So Juju Smith-Schuster, I have +7 on consensus. And the reason is because Deontay Johnson's been excellent. I understand that. He's been really good. But we have yet to see him go against a great corner because Bradbury shadowed Juju in the first game. It is projected that Deontay Johnson will be the one who is shadowed by Darius Slay in this game. So, I mean, I would look for Juju to have a big game in this one. I think Deontay Johnson in the 2.5 games that he's played or whatever, he was being shadowed by Bradley Roby in the game that he left with a concussion, or what it was a concussion that he left with, I believe. So he left that game with a concussion, but he was being shadowed in that game. He had 2 targets and 0 catches. I'm not really going to take too much away from that, but Darius Slay has been very good this year against top-tier receivers. So I think this is a Juju game for Ben Roethlisberger and the Steelers offense.
Yep, I fully agree. I'm 12 spots higher than consensus, so we're both in agreement there. I currently have him as my wide receiver 10 in half PPR. I think that would make him your wide receiver 15?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We're on the same boat there. Talking about my next guy that I'm higher on than consensus. That's going to be Justin Jefferson, wide receiver from the Minnesota Vikings. So I have him 6 spots higher than consensus. Currently my wide receiver 18, I believe. Yeah, my wide receiver 18 and expert consensus has him at 24. So talking about Justin Jefferson, mentioned a little bit with Dalvin Cook, but the Seahawks are an absolute gold mine when you're talking about fantasy football wide receivers, actually giving up the most points to the position thus far. Again, Justin Jefferson to me, or not to me, but this is actually factual. Justin Jefferson is a top 10 in terms of receiving yards in the NFL right now. And he's
that's number 1 graded receiver right now.
He's had back-to-back 100-yard games. I mean, realistically, after that 175-yard explosion, which, of course, I was playing him that week. But after that 175-yard explosion, people's main questions were, yeah, he's a rookie receiver. He's going to flash, but can he do it consistently? 4 catches for 103 yards the following week. Again, mentioned top 10 in receiving yards. the sort of trust that he's building right now with Kirk Cousins operating as the wide receiver 2 behind Adam Thielen is monumental. Again, this is a team that's actually looked decently efficient on offense after that Colts game. And ultimately, if Justin Jefferson's going to keep playing the way he has been, he's going to be in every week top 20 wide receiver, similar to kind of what we've seen CeeDee Lamb kind of become over these first 4 weeks too. So, man, CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson are absolutely explosive rookie receivers. And
there's like at least 8 more that you could name.
For sure. And like I love Justin Jefferson. Expect that top 20 production yet again against that Seahawks depleted secondary, especially if
man.
So
the guy I compared Keenan Allen, or I just spoiled it. The guy I compared Justin Jefferson to was Keenan Allen / Keenan McCardle, 2 Keenans that I'm pretty familiar with, watching a lot of. Keenan Allen kind of they just run the same. Like they look the same when they play. They're just so precise. They're so smart and savvy with their route running. The way that Justin Jefferson is playing is exactly how he played at LSU. That's kind of a big deal. Like when people talk about college production not meaning much, like it is important for receivers to be productive. And I mean, can you like other than his own teammate, Jamar Chase in college, who was more productive than Justin Jefferson last year? Pretty much no one in college football. So it's not really shocking to me. It is kind of shocking to me because I thought he'd have a bit more of a transition, especially being on the COVID list during training camp and stuff. So you can color me incorrect when I said that Justin Jefferson was going to get off to a slow start in his NFL career because he's PFF's number 1 graded receiver. He's playing out of his mind. On to the next guy who is also a great young receiver. Deebo Samuel, I have 19 spots higher than consensus. And again, this is probably due to the fact that he was coming off of injury. That's why he's kind of low in consensus, but I have him quite high. I have him in like wide receiver 2 territory. He's going up against Noah Igbenogany, who's a rookie corner for the Dolphins in the slot, who has a 32.7 coverage grade according to PFF. He was allowing 20.0 yards per reception, which for the record is what AJ Brown averaged last year. And everyone was like, oh, regression. So he's averaging AJ Brown numbers in coverage against him and a near perfect passer rating against him. So I think Deebo Samuel only ran 15 routes last week, and he looked incredible on those routes. He was easing in last week. I don't think he's easing in this week. I think he's back to borderline full strength. He'll probably run 80% of the snaps or something. I think he's going to go off in this game. And Jimmy Garoppolo is back as well for this game.
Fully agree on Deebo Samuel. I love him too, for the record. He's just one of my personal favorite players to watch in the NFL. Talking about guys we are we'll lower on. Well, I
have one more guy that I'm higher on.
Go for it.
All right, Russell Gage. I'm 9 spots higher than him on consensus. Limited or no Julio in this game. We're going to get one of the two. It's going to be either a limited Julio Jones or no Julio Jones against a terrible defense. The Panthers' defense is awful, and the Falcons pass the ball like crazy. So give me Russell Gage. He's like my wide receiver 32, I believe.
Yep, there you go. Talking about the guys we're lowering on, and that's going to be Odell Beckham, wide receiver from the Cleveland Browns. 6 spots lower than ECR. I mean, I was actually surprised when ECR had him at 19. I thought some buttheads were going to have him at like wide receiver 13 or something like that.
Yeah, I actually was a little surprised they didn't have him at like 11 or something.
Yeah. I mean, Odell Beckham, guys, sell him high if you still have an opportunity to. People are going to point out, 36 points. Let's go. Guess how many were actually from Baker Mayfield in that game? 14. 14 of those points were from Baker Mayfield.
Unless Jarvis Landry throws another lemon to him and then he has another 75-yard carry or whatever it was, I don't think Odell Beckham's getting 36 points.
Or Jalen Smith trying to run in quicksand across the field to try to tackle him on a fucking end around. Like, that's just not a thing. That's not going to happen against an actual NFL defense. Yes, my Cowboys aren't an actual NFL defense. I get it. You guys don't have to keep reminding me about that. But, yeah, Odell Beckham, he's not even a wide receiver 2 this week, to be honest.
Roads are closed, man.
Yeah, I mean, Xavier Rhodes and that Colts pass defense, run defense, the whole defense for them, to be quite honest, has been fantastic this year. So do not start Odell Beckham this week unless you're pressed for volume, whatever. Like, don't start him with high expectations is what I should say.
Yeah, he's definitely a startable receiver. So you don't want to be sitting a guy coming off a 36-point outing. He's still like a wide receiver, high-end wide receiver 3 probably is where I have him about ranked. But the roads are closed, man. They were under construction last year and he got torched like crazy, but Xavier Rhodes is playing like he was a couple of years ago. So I don't know if that's just a flash, if that's just a mirage. Maybe it's the scheme that he's in. The Colts scheme is really conservative. Like maybe that might shock some people with how good they've played, but they just run like a lot of cover 3 and stuff, like, which is what Xavier Rhodes can do. Like, he's not really excelling in man-to-man defense anymore based on the way he's been playing. So quickly on a couple of receivers I'm lower on. DJ Moore, I have him 11 spots lower than consensus. DJ Moore, where do I actually have him? Yes, I'm
21.
at 27. His consensus at 16. I know he's playing the Falcons. I understand that, but like DJ Moore has not shown it. Like he hasn't shown it yet. And until he actually does show it, because Anderson's the dude. It's Robbie Anderson's, like he's the wide receiver 1A or whatever, if you want to call him that. And Mike Davis is basically doing what Christian McCaffrey would be doing in this offense right now. So the Christian McCaffrey loss isn't even a big deal. Like it's DJ Moore is the third option in this passing game. And yes, this is a great game script and a pass heavy game script. And he could make me look stupid in this game, but I'd rather look stupid on him and rank him lower than be like, oh yeah, this is the DJ Moore week and play him in my DFS lineups and have him fucking shit the bed again.
Yeah, I fully agree on him. I'm with you there. Do you have anybody else you're lower on before we get into tight ends? Because you kind of had more guys listed than me.
Yeah, T.Y. Hilton, I have 21 spots lower than consensus. I have my wide receiver 51. T.Y. Hilton, well, I'll rank you as a top 36 receiver once you actually do something because you haven't done anything. So I'm not ranking T.Y. Hilton. There's no way I would start T.Y. Hilton right now. He is borderline droppable. Him, Marvin Jones, a couple other guys, Brandon Cooks, like these guys are all in the same kind of tier where I believe all three of those guys were on the fantasy footballers like retirement ceremony because they were once really good fantasy assets, Jones and Cooks and Hilton. And I also heard someone say that T.Y. Hilton hasn't posted a game with 83 receiving yards since like without Andrew Luck in his career.
Yep, I saw that too. Talking about that though, Bush, why are you disrespecting my boy T.Y. Hilton? I had him and AJ Green in my 2016 fantasy football championship team. Like, come on, man. He's fantastic. No, okay.
No, he's not fantastic. He's cooked. T.Y. Hilton is washed.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. I just wanted to pull those guys in the comments that are going to be.
And his quarterback play isn't helping him.
Yeah, I agree. Talking to the next position, we're going to be going in the tight end. So you can take this away because we kind of have a lot of similar names here, but you can hop on the kind of like similar names we have because I only really have one that you don't have. So you can start it off.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, we do have similar names. We both have Jonnu Smith higher than consensus. I have him at tight end 4, and I believe you have him at tight end 5. That's 6 and 5 spots higher than consensus, respectively. This dude's been hyper efficient on his targets. He's a top 5 tight end rest of season, in my opinion.
Agreed.
And he can be that on only 4 or 5 targets per game because he's that talented. He's that efficient. His offense is that efficient. The play action game, his usage in the red zone is incredible. He has a 21% target share of his offense and a 33% red zone share. All the plays in the red zone are designed to go to Derrick Henry in the Titans offense. But when they don't go to Derrick Henry, they run play action plays with Jonnu Smith. And that's how pretty much all of his touchdowns have been scored thus far. And I just think, and again, this could be the experts being low on him because they don't know if this game's going to be played or not. But if Jonnu Smith plays, he's top 5 tight end.
Agreed. Talking about, I'll mention my one name, then you can take over the rest. But Eric Ebron, I have 3 spots lower than consensus at 18 right now. He's currently ranked at 15. I believe you have him at 17. And this is not just kind of like me hating on Ebron, but what has he really done to deserve a top 15 ranking thus far? Yes, he had one decent game, 5 for 52 and a touchdown before the bye week or whatever shenanigans you want to call with the Bills. But until I really see it consistently from the tight end position in Pittsburgh, I'm just avoiding it because we've seen this story so many times with Pittsburgh tight ends since Heath Miller retired. Oh, this guy had one good game. He's going to be a baller the rest of the season. Remember, Vance McDonald was like a top 6, 7 tight end pick a couple years ago. I mean, yes, Ebron is talented, and there's opportunity to ultimately see it consistently from him. But until I do see it consistently from him and Big Ben, not to mention he did have that game with Deontay Johnson getting hurt as well. So that's something to keep in mind as well. I'm not going to overreact over one game. I think tight end 18 even is a much finer ranking for him, personally projecting forward. But having him in the top 15, even ahead of guys like Logan Thomas, Molly Cox, in my opinion, even Jimmy Graham, to be quite honest, I had ranked higher. I don't see it with Ebron yet until I actually see him do it consistently. So I have him at 18.
Yeah, I agree on Ebron. One more guy that I do have higher than consensus is Logan Thomas. I have him 3 spots higher than consensus at 14. He's number 1 in slot rate among tight ends, which I think is very interesting. And it's like 60% of his routes or of his plays are coming from the slot. So, I mean, he's not even seeing tight end like defenders. He's seeing slot corners in coverage. So I think Logan Thomas, we'll have to see how the quarterback change affects him. but I don't think it can get any worse than what Dwayne Haskins was putting out there. And Logan Thomas's target share was incredible. And I don't think that's like a product of, oh, he has great chemistry with Dwayne Haskins. I think that's the way the offense is just operating. The fact that he's able to get open and he's just getting thrown the ball. Like I think Logan Thomas is a talented player, and I think he's going to be like a top 16 tight end going forward. And I think we'll have to see how Kyle Allen and him gel together, but I think it's going to get back on track in this game.
Yeah, I fully agree there. Mentioning a guy, I know you have him listed as well, but we'll just talk in conjunction about Evan Engram. And this is one to me that people want to put up there because, we've seen Evan Engram in the past. He's a fast, elusive player. He's so good with the ball in his hands. He's so good after the catch. Until I see both him and Daniel Jones actually perform this year, there's no way in heck he's touching my top 10. I mean, he's an ECR of 10 right now when he's literally done nothing all year. He's the tight end 25 and
he's getting elite volume too. He has number 3 in targets at the tight end position. Number 3, and he's tight end 25 in points per game. Like, he has been horrible. And everyone's like, oh, well, he's like efficient because he's like a fast. Like, he's never been efficient. Even in his rookie year, when he got all those targets and he wasn't efficient on them, he has never been an efficient player. You're thinking of that 75-yard touchdown he had against the Bucs against Vernon Hargreaves in coverage, which I'm pretty sure I could have burned him on that play.
Same.
Like, Evan Engram is number 2 in routes run at the position, but he's number 1 in drops. Like, he's not, like, he's just not playing well. And maybe he's injured, maybe like what, I don't care, because Evan Ingram's always injured. He's always
something wrong with him.
There's always something wrong. And I don't really want to play a guy like that because you see him get thrown the ball so many times. It's super frustrating because you're like, oh my God, just catch it. Or just like, oh my God, why is Daniel Jones so bad? Like, he has a bad quarterback, bad offense, playing bad. Don't want anything to do with it. And I think kind of along those lines as well as Austin Hooper, I have 4 spots lower than consensus. The guy had one good game against the Cowboys defense, guys. Like, let's relax on Austin Hooper. He was on waiver wires before that game. Like, he was playing like crap. And that, not only is that defense bad that the Cowboys have, it was one of the worst defensive performances in a single game I've ever seen also. And I'm sure you could probably attest to that. And then Greg Olsen, just real quick, I have 6 spots lower than consensus as well, mainly because Minnesota has Eric Kendricks, Anthony Harris, and Harrison Smith as the tight end defenders, who are the 3 best defenders on their defense. And I think the receivers are the guys that eat in this game with Lockett and Metcalf. And Olsen's probably shut down by Eric Kendricks in coverage, who's been one of the best coverage linebackers in the league for the last 5 years.
Not to mention, guys, like, Seattle has DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. Are they really going to be throwing the ball to Greg Olsen in this matchup when
he could catch a touchdown? I will admit that he could catch a touchdown in this game. It should be a relatively high-scoring game, so he might just catch a touchdown, but I don't think he's getting a lot of targets, and I'll just choose to play other options over him.
Realistically, who do you think is going to get more targets, him or Chris Carson? I think that would be much rather Chris Carson in that regard.
I'd rather, guys that I have ranked ahead of Greg Olsen were, Jimmy Graham, who had a good game last night. Obviously, you can't play him now. Eric Ebron, I would still play over Greg Olsen. Drew Sample has been getting solid targets. Noah Fant, if he plays, I'm not really sure if he's going to play or not. And then, even Tyler Eifert and, maybe I'm a little low on Greg Olsen. I think I should move him ahead of Chris Herndon and Mo Alley Cox. But other than that, I think tight end 22, kind of like borderline playable range is where Greg Olsen belongs, not tight end 18 where he is an ECR, which is a streamable option, a very strong streamable option at that.
Fully agree. So pretty much I think that's going to be going through our whole rankings pretty much, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end. Kind of glance through our top starts, top busts, biggest discrepancies between ourselves, even between us, to be quite honest. The viewers were able to see that on display a little bit as well. But if you made it this far in the video, make sure you go help us out by leaving a like button down below. Make sure you comment too. A lot of people
comment anything. Comment, tell us that we look good today, or comment that we look dumb today, like whatever. And also let us know, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, let us know whether you like Danny doing this by himself or you like me on it as well, because we might be doing some changes in the schedule again. I know we should probably stop doing that because we've done a million changes thus far, but it's all based on your guys' feedback. Whatever you guys enjoy, we're here to kind of help you guys out. Whatever you like to listen to, whether you want to hear us talk about our rankings, whether you want to hear more DFS content, whatever you guys want to do. So, Danny, get us out of here.
Yeah, with that being said, we'll peace out. We'll see you guys again next Saturday with the week 6 ranking. So anyways, take care, y'all.